Mr. Sokwani Chilembo, Chief Executive Officer, Zambia Chamber of Mines. Mr. Rodney Sikumba, Chairperson, Livingstone Tourism Association. Dr. Nathan Kapata, Head of Epidemic Preparedness and Response, Zambia National Public Health Institute, ZNPHI. Dr. Rhoda Mofiamukuka, Head of Research and Agriculture, Food Security and Nutrition in the for Agricultural Policy Research Institution, IAPRI, our media partners, distinguished ladies and gentlemen tuned in, my dearest colleagues in PMRC. It is my honor to offer you all a special welcome to this first ever online discussion forum by the Policy Monitoring and Research Center, PMRC. This forum is aimed at discussing the prospects of Zambia's post-COVID socio-economic recovery path in selected sectors, namely tourism, mining, agriculture, education, and health sectors. The impact of the COVID-19 pandemic has been significant, with harsh effects on various sectors of Zambia's economy. And as the country strives to mitigate the shocks of COVID-19, recover and rebuild the economy, many lessons can be drawn in order to build resilience and better response strategies for future pandemics. This forum seeks to engage experts in various fields to draw lessons and provide direction for Zambia's economic recovery path. Ladies and gentlemen, Zambia reported its first confirmed case of COVID-19 on 18th March 2020. And as of yesterday, August 5th, 2020, the cumulative number of COVID-19 cases in the country was on the rise, with 7,022 confirmed cases, including 176 deaths and 5,667 recoveries. Although the full impact of the COVID-19 shock on the public health and the economy cannot be determined at the moment, indications are that it will be unprecedented, with some projections from Ministry of Finance and IMF and other institutions indicating the Zambian economy will experience negative growth in 2020, shrinking by at least 2.6%. To this effect, government has introduced several measures to address the impact of the pandemic on the economy. And recently, Cabinet approved the establishment of an economic stimulus package through the issuance of an 8 billion COVID-19 bond, which aims to improve the liquidity levels in the economy, which reduced due to the coronavirus pandemic. Government, through the Bank of Zambia earlier on, issued a medium-term lending facility of 10 billion, which is a 3 to 5 years facility made available to eligible financial service providers to facilitate restructuring of refinancing of qualifying facilities and onward. I'd like to thank all our discussants who have taken time off their busy schedules to share with us their expert views on the subject matter. And I further appeal to everyone who has joined us to actively participate and interact with our discussants through our various online platforms on the topic at hand, of course. And we further request that some of the questions are sent in advance through the Zoom platform so that even on our PMRC page, so that our experts within the institution can begin to answer, and while others can be sent during the forum. It is our fervent hope and aspiration that today's discussion will play a critical role in shaping Zambia's post-COVID-19 recovery path of building a resilient economy. With these few words, I welcome you all to the first forum, and we're looking forward to its success so that the next one that we have planned can thrive on this very first. Good morning once again.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Edie, for those welcoming remarks. The meeting has been officially opened, and it gives us the tone for what happens moving forward. So having said that, we shall be going into the first submission from the education sector, from the Ministry of Education. But before that, we're just sort of giving a brief synopsis of why this discussion today. And I think the ED has mentioned in the speech that Zambia recorded its first cases in March. And as of yesterday, the figures have grown cumulatively to about 6,000 plus. And recoveries are 5,000 plus, but also we have 173 deaths. Globally, the picture shows a very worrying trend. The cases, more than 18 million cases. Recoveries, 11 million plus. But also if you look at the number of deaths, more than 700,000 deaths globally. And from an African perspective, we have more than 800,000 cases, more than 500,000 recoveries, and more than 18,000 deaths. Now, we all know that the coronavirus pandemic has destabilized the global economy as a whole. And we've seen this manifest in several ways across different sectors. Of course, to all the participants watching, you can attest that the aviation sector has been affected. We've seen airlines closing, letting people go. We've seen interruptions of businesses, supply chains, all that has been affected. The global health system has also been affected because nations now have to cope with that. And also we've seen chain stores being affected, among others. In Zambia, clearly we've seen from the Ministry of Finance mentioning that our national budget for this year has been affected by more than 14 to 20% more in terms of how much will actually need to be spent. So meaning we have to look for that money. And this discussion also brings some highlights towards that. We've seen disruptions with the school calendar. We've seen pupils and students be away from schools. So those kinds of realities that we face as a nation today are things that we're going to discuss in this platform to try and bring about solutions. So in as much as we're going to focus on the challenges, we also pretty much focus on the solutions to see how we can collectively develop strategies that we're going to share with the government in terms of what we feel as a collective that needs to be done to help that. And also lastly, some of the mitigation measures that the government has put in place, like the ED mentioned, we launched a COVID bond, 8 billion. Then there's also the Bank of Zambia mid-term lending facility of 10 billion as well. We've had a 2.5 billion release to be given to suppliers as well to put money into the economy. We've had 140 million released to pay local contractors. So government on its own has been playing its role and ensuring that it does what it can. But the reality is that every sector wants to see some relief from the government. And our distinguished experts this morning are going to help us answer that. So to begin with, we are going to welcome from the Ministry of General Education, Mr. Ngosa Kotati, who is the Director, Teacher Education and Specialized Services. Basically, we shall be understanding what is happening in the education sector, especially with the move for pupils to learn online, and also to find out if our education sector is designed in such a way that it can cope with this pandemic as well as future pandemics. So at this moment in time, we give Mr. Kotati 15 minutes in which to give us our submission. Mr. Kotati, you can take it up from here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Like I've been introduced, my name is Ngosa Kotati. I'm Director in charge of Teacher Education and Specialized Services, representing PS Technical Services, Dr. Jobix Kalumba. As everyone has noticed, the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of General Education has not been spared by the COVID pandemic. Starting 20th March 2020, we closed the schools prematurely because of the breakout of the disease. And we remained closed up to about June.
Yes. Can you go ahead, sir?
Yes, please. We remained closed up to about up to June, and we realized that if we didn't do anything, we would remain closed for the rest of the year. And so we had to open for examination classes, hoping that things would improve and later open for non-examination classes. Unfortunately, the situation hasn't been improving and our schools remain closed except for examination classes and the final year classes at college level. In making my presentation, I'll try to look at the readiness of Zambia to shift from the traditional classroom to a modern mode of teaching and learning. I'll also look at whether we as a country have necessary infrastructure in place to withstand future shocks. I'll also try to look at what the major challenges and lessons learned from the COVID-19 pandemic is. Then I'll also talk about some of the strategies we have adopted as a ministry and the measures that we have put in place to ensure that the learners that are in school are safe. If someone was to ask me whether as a country we are ready to shift from the traditional classroom model to a modern way of teaching, my answer would be we are not yet ready. Why do I say so? To begin with, most of our teachers, their training has been predominantly in such a way that they have to go and teach in a face-to-face manner. And that is what they have been doing. So with the breakout of the COVID-19, it was not easy for our teachers to adapt and start offering lessons in a different way. The other reason why we feel that we are not ready as a country is that we do not have the necessary infrastructure to support e-learning. And when I say infrastructure, I mean both on our part as ministry and also the community. As a ministry, we haven't invested much in e-learning, and therefore it is not very easy for us to do the transmission of lessons via e-learning. Of course, we have education broadcasting services, which has a studio in Lusaka and another one in Kitwe, but then we don't seem to have invested heavily in these facilities. The other part is the community. Even if we were able to transmit our lessons via e-learning, most of the Zambians are not able to access lessons via TV or radio or even internet. You agree with me that in most places, it's possible to make a call, but you cannot access internet. In the same case, it's not everywhere where you find the TV signal. Even when there is a signal in a place, it's not possible to find everyone being in possession of a TV. So in terms of whether as a ministry are ready to shift from the traditional classroom to modern mode of teaching, I would say we are not ready for now. Looking at the infrastructure, we want to say that for now, like I've already pointed out, we don't have the necessary infrastructure to support to withstand future shocks. And I want to say that COVID-19 has been a wake-up call. Like they say, to every cloud, there is a silver lining. While this has been a negative trend, we feel that we've learned a lot and have come to realize that we haven't done so much to support this type of learning, and this surely should be the starting point. So we do not seem to have the necessary infrastructure to withstand future shocks, and our hope is that between now and the future, we should be able to do more to prepare ourselves for any future shocks. And what we need to do is to invest in infrastructure to avoid what we have gone through this time around. You agree with me that in 2014, the ministry ran the first examination at grade 9 for computer studies, and it was hell. That was because most of our schools didn't have the necessary computers and even just infrastructure to do with the electricity. And the situation has not improved much. Now, if we were to look at the major challenges that we have had as a ministry in relation to what is happening today, I think one of them has been the lack of resources to provide teaching and learning using alternative modes of education provision, such as distance learning materials, radio, TV, and the internet. So as a ministry, we have a college in Luansha called the Zambia College of Distance Education. This is a college that produces distance learning materials, but it needs the necessary maybe computers and the machines to help produce learning materials at large scale. We also have, we also transmit radio, but you agree with me that not every place is able to receive radio. You may wish to know that we have, we are airing lessons via TV, and the challenge that we seem to have is that most of our learners are not able to access that because either they're in a place where there is no TV signal or they don't have a television. The other challenge that we've had as a ministry is, like I've pointed out, our teachers have not been prepared for alternative modes of education provision. And most of you are products of Zambian education, and you agree with me that in most cases, the type of teaching you encountered was teacher talking to you and writing on the board. Those of you who might have gone to private schools probably had a chance to learn something on PowerPoint and the other modes of learning. But I think that is one of the challenges that we have, that of our teachers not being ready or prepared to go and teach using alternative modes of learning. Like I pointed out, as a ministry, we have a studio, in fact, studios, one in Lusaka and the other one in Kitwe. But the challenge that we have there is in terms of qualified personnel. When a lesson is prepared, you need some people to go and edit it. But we seem to have a challenge because according to our structure, we don't have a provision for officers who are supposed to be editing those programs. And that in itself is a challenge. What are the lessons that we have learned? I think the lessons we have learned are that one of them is that we need to include ICT in the teacher education curriculum, and this is happening. But I think with what we have encountered, we need to do even more so that this becomes just a major course that a teacher needs to take before graduating, so that wherever they will be, they should be ready to transmit a lesson or to do lessons using other modes of learning. We also, there is also need for the country to invest heavily in alternative modes of education provision, as well as the infrastructure. And this means that we need to provide computers to our schools, computers to our colleges, and also ensure that more and more people are able to access television signal, they're able to access internet connectivity, and so on and so forth. I should be able to point out that the biggest challenge we had as a ministry was mostly with the primary up to secondary. We had less challenges with the colleges because colleges started looking at issues of providing learning via alternative modes of education provision a long time ago. So I think for them, the impact wasn't much as compared to what the primary and secondary schools went through. In terms of what strategies we are adopting, I think one of them we want to do is that since we already have teachers who are trained to teach as primary, secondary school teachers and the college lecturers, what we need to do is to intensify our continuing professional development for our teachers so that we can build capacity in them to deliver lessons via alternative learning modes. We also would want to strengthen alternative modes of education. And by saying so, we feel that we need to do more with our college in Rwansha, Zakode, and our two studios, one in Lusaka and the other one in Copper Belt. So we need to strengthen that, and we should have a deliberate policy to provide things like radios in schools so that even when we are able to deliver lessons via radio, everybody should be able to access that. And I think generally investing in infrastructure, we need to ensure that schools have enough computers and so that they are able to provide education through other modes of learning. You may wish to know that even as this happened, there have been some scattered efforts in different schools. You find that certain institutions have done better than others. There are people with the little that they could do who could record lessons and then send them to their students, their pupils to learn. But I think what we need to do is to look at what everybody has been doing and see how best we can bring that together so that similar things are done in all schools. In terms of measures we have put in place to protect the pupils while they are in school this time, one of them is to ensure that schools adhere to health guidelines that have been put in place. When the schools opened, the ministry released officers to go throughout the country, although they may not have visited all schools, but the idea was to go to all the provinces to see the readiness of schools to open. And I think the results were encouraging. We found that there was a lot of adherence to the guidelines that the Ministry of Health has put in place. Our children were able to put on masks, but I want to also submit that our children are putting on masks just because they are fearing someone. If they are day scholars, they'll come all the way from their homes without masks, but when they approach the school, that's when they put on their masks. So we need to work together to ensure that the children realize they need to wear their masks even when they are not in school.
Okay, thank you. Just a minute.
Yes,
you have 2 minutes to wind up, sir.
Sure.
Thank you.
We have also tried to ensure that there is social distancing in classrooms and hostels. You notice that in a school where there were 40 pupils in a class, this time you only find 20 maximum. We have also restricted the number of people visiting our schools just to ensure that we don't have unnecessary spread of the disease. But I think the biggest challenge we have is with schools which are day schools, because it becomes very difficult to control the pupils when they are at their homes. I submit. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that submission, Mr. Ngosa Kotati from the Ministry of General Education. I believe this was a very honest submission, very objective, stating the realities on the ground in relation to what is happening, because there's been a lot of questions, people asking what is really happening in the education sector. And I think many points have come out, especially looking at the current teacher training and how it is done. Of course, COVID has been a wake-up call to see that there is need for us to probably change the way we do the teacher training, to enhance ICTs. And also, even as we are promoting ICTs as a nation, we're also looking at infrastructure. Does every school in Zambia today have the required ICT infrastructure needed to ensure that learning goes smoothly? Also, another critical point was the aspect of alternative teaching methods. I think as the world is evolving, as we are into the new normal, that is something that we have actually taken away from. And I can assure you, Mr. Ngosa, that there have been questions that have been coming through, but to our dear participants and audience, we are going to take this during the plenary session, because we want to allow every speaker to make their submission, and then we can have a rich discussion. So keep those questions coming through, and also people will be allowed to actually ask questions as well. So we can attest that the questions have started coming through, but we shall take them during the plenary, or maybe after 2 or 3 presentations as we decide. So having said that, we switch to the health sector, which is very critical. And I think the Ministry of Health has been in the forefront in terms of the fight against COVID, with different frontline workers, members, actually ensuring that we actually help ourselves as a nation. And so we also just want to make an announcement that the questions can be sent to the host. When you check on the participants list, kindly forward your questions to the host, for the PMRC Zambia. That is the host, the name written PMRC Zambia. And also just to make mention that we are also live on Facebook from the PMRC Zambia page. So kindly note that Mr. Ngosa will be with us throughout, and he will be taking on those questions. We now switch to the health sector. And basically, we want to find out what is happening in our health sector. Of course, we do understand that it has had its own challenges. It even had its own challenges before the COVID pandemic. But with the coming in of COVID, there are realities that are coming out from the health sector in terms of capacities, in terms of financing, in terms of the workforce that is needed to ensure that we're able to manage this COVID. And also, we just want to find out the preparedness of our health sector as a whole in an event that COVID continues for the rest of the year, continues for the time to come. How do we evolve? How do we strengthen our health sector? And also, how do we capacitate our health sector moving into preparedness for the next probably pandemic that will come through? So the next submission is coming from the Zambia National Public Health Institute, and our presenter is Dr. Nathan Kapata, who is the head Epidemic Preparedness and Response. Dr. Kapata, the floor is yours for 15 minutes. You can go ahead.
Thank you very much, moderator. And thank you very much from the previous presentation. That was very enlightening. I have a PowerPoint presentation that I will share with you. And just kindly confirm if you are able to see the presentation.
Yes, the presentation is on the screen. Thank you, Doctor.
Great.
So you can go into full screen mode.
Yeah. Okay, so that's our presentation, just to give a quick reminder of things that have already been discussed, that the outbreak we are discussing today, the COVID-19, was first reported in China in 2019, and by January 2020, WHO declared it a public health emergency of international concern, and as of March, it was already declared a global pandemic. And of course, in terms of cases, my colleagues, previous speakers have already alluded to what we are seeing globally and regionally. A quick recap of what we have seen in terms of the situation in Zambia is that we reported the first cases of COVID-19 on 18th March 2020. These 2 cases were initially imported from Europe, and thereafter the cases that followed were cases that were coming from outside the country, particularly from international travelers and also cross-border traders and other cross-border truck drivers and so on. Subsequently, we began to see local transmission in the country, meaning we started seeing contacts of those fewer cases, but the numbers started increasing, and eventually this was localized in communities. At the beginning of the outbreak, earlier times, it was in certain cohorts of individuals. Initially, the religious pilgrims who had traveled to Pakistan, then followed by a cohort of truck drivers. Then we had health workers, but then eventually we started seeing these cases across various, communities. And consequently now we have been seeing a generalized local transmission. Initially the cases were limited to low density areas, but now we have begun to see cases coming from high density areas. That has big implications in terms of how we manage this. And the other thing that we also have to understand is that the epidemic itself is moving very fast and the trajectory keeps changing. COVID-19, as you are aware, the virus that's causing COVID-19 is a newly discovered virus that has not been seen before. That's why it's called novel COVID, novel virus, novel coronavirus. Therefore, we are still understanding, and scientists are still trying to figure out a number of things. Its mode of transmission, how best we can prevent it, but it's also affecting people in various ways, and the kind of symptoms that we are seeing are kind of diverse and different in a number of areas. Now, what have we done? The government has not sat idle. From the beginning, government worked on a contingency plan right from the start, a multi-sectoral, national multi-sectoral COVID-19 contingency plan that was prepared. Multi-sectoral meaning all the sectors in government. This process was led through the Disaster Management and Mitigation Unit, coordinating all the various sectors in government to come up with a contingency plan that outlines the preparedness and response activities, as well as other support activities that are required based on the trajectory at the time of preparation of the contingency plan. And this is a contingency plan, therefore it is revised according to how the pandemic is evolving and progressing. Right now, as we are speaking, I have colleagues who are already assembled and reviewing the strategic plans, trying to revise this contingency plan to ensure that we capture what the situation is right now and mobilize resources according to the needs of what is required. So this strategic plan, the initial strategic plan, was anchored on these 4 pillars that have been highlighted there. That is coordination, planning, and monitoring. Pillar 2, halt, treat, and prevent COVID-19, which is really what the Ministry of Health core business is under where the Zambia National Public Health Institute falls. And then, of course, the pillar for continuity of provision of essential health services and preservation of socioeconomic stability, that the economy has to continue. From the health sector, based on those, particularly those those pillars that speak to the health sector, we have we prepared a health preparedness and response plan that is anchored again on 8-pronged strategy, that is to deal with ensuring surveillance and case finding, making sure that cases are early detected, quickly isolated, quarantined if possible, and treated appropriately, just to halt transmission within the communities. Also, issues of ensuring all those cases are managed and infection prevention and control strategies are put in place. And another key strategy is risk communication and community engagement, because it's important for people to understand what's going on and to be informed, particularly of what they should do in order to protect themselves and protect others. Issues of laboratory diagnosis, logistics, and supply chain management are also key, particularly at this moment when there are a lot of issues to do with the supply chain. The previous speaker spoke of, reduction in traffic, reduction in flights, reduction in trucks, reduction in movement of goods. Therefore, that has an impact in terms of how much commodities do you then get to come and assist in responding if you need to respond. And of course, what is very much needed is an appropriate and competent and adequate workforce that should be able to respond effectively and competently to the issues that are coming up from the COVID-19 outbreak. COVID-19 outbreak and the COVID-19 is not the only disease. There are a lot of other diseases, and therefore we have to continue providing essential health services. So the strategy speaks to that area also, ensuring that there is continuity of routine essential health services. As you are aware, Zambia has a lot of other morbidities that people suffer from, and therefore we still have to attend to that and in the country. In terms of coordination, the response is being coordinated at various levels. We are very pleased and happy that this coordination, the COVID outbreak, is coordinated at the highest office. And we have various bodies or platforms that are participating in this coordination. At policy level, we have the National Disaster Management Council of Ministers. This is a council of cabinet ministers who are under the auspices of the office of Honor the Vice President, who chairs this council of ministers and speak to ensuring that COVID issues are addressed fully from a multi-sectoral aspect based on what we have highlighted in the contingency plan. Also, we have the National Epidemic Preparedness, Prevention, Control, Management Committees that are replicated at the national level, provincial level, as well as at district levels. This again at the national level, very high policy level, chaired by the Honorable Minister of Health, who you have seen has committed his time and has been so generous that every day has been able to provide updates of what's happening in terms of what we're doing as the Ministry of Health and National Public Health Institute to respond to the COVID-19. And also an inter-ministerial committee of permanent secretaries on disaster management and preparedness. And at technical level, we also have the Public Health Emergency Operations Center that has been activated to coordinate the response from the various districts and provinces across the country, which are linked to the National Public Health Emergency Operations Center, providing technical guidance and looking at the technical areas. And currently, right now, as we're speaking, there is actually a meeting that's going on virtually with various stakeholders discussing how the COVID-19 should be, addressed and so on, depending on what's happening at the moment. So currently the situation is changing rapidly. Like I said, the epidemiology is changing rapidly. We're seeing an increase in the number of cases, particularly the positive cases, an increase also in the severity of the cases. We're seeing more cases. We're seeing a lot of ill patients. We're seeing increased number of deaths that has been reported, generalized outbreak with increased geographical spread, meaning almost all the parts of the country have been reached. And as I indicated earlier, there's been a shift from the high to, from the low density areas to high density areas, meaning therefore that a lot of people are at risk and a lot of people are getting infected. Unfortunately, what is very concerning is that a lot of people are relaxing and are not taking this epidemic very seriously, not giving it the seriousness that it deserves. And there is laxity in compliance to public health measures that the Ministry of Health has actually put up. This, my colleague has spoken to. This is just to give a quick update in terms of what the numbers were as of yesterday. Yes, more than 7,000 cases, total recovery close to 6,000, deaths, more than 160 people have died. What are our health sector challenges? Of course, Zambia's geographical location, being landlocked or land-linked, as you may want to say, has neighboring states that have weak health systems and fragile health systems, basically trees. There is also population movements, people coming in the country seeking asylum, illegal immigrants, etc., and also, of course, cross-border truck drivers and movement of goods. We also have diseases, infections, low capacity to detect, prevent, respond to disease outbreaks. This again has been spoken to, but it's very important that we have inadequate human resources, we have inadequate infrastructure, particularly we do not have a dedicated public health laboratory network or system that should be able to facilitate our quick identification of cases, appropriate diagnosis, so that we are able to quickly diagnose, quickly give results, quickly understand, what's happening to, in terms of the bacteria or the viruses that we're dealing with. That's very key, that we need to have proper dedicated public health laboratories and a network of such laboratories to assist, in making these diagnoses. Of course, we have limited also specialized treatment and facilities and hospitals where to manage these cases. In case we have an overwhelming number of cases, currently those numbers that we've shown are being managed in a few isolating or isolation facilities. Definitely, if the numbers keep increasing from what we're seeing, the whole health system may actually get overwhelmed. Therefore, quite a huge.
Doc, you've got 2 minutes to wind up. Thank you.
Yes, I'm almost there. So in terms of public health security, government has prioritized health security, ensuring universal health coverage, and hence has established the National Public Health Institute. That is a center of excellence for public health security anchored on 6 pillars: surveillance and disease intelligence, emergency preparedness and response, laboratory systems and networks, communication, information and research, monitoring and evaluation, and workforce development. In terms of the regional response, we're working closely with the Africa Center for Disease Prevention and Control, Africa CDC, in terms of coordination and response, supply chain, and capacity building. Other regional collaborating centers under the Africa CDC and also the Southern Africa Development Community, the SADC, there is a protocol on health dealing with regional integration. And we've taken advantage of this. Currently, we've been working on harmonization of guidelines in the region and also facilitating logistical and supply chain support. And the WHO and other UN agencies also providing guidance, technical support, and also logistical support to facilitate and assist response in the various areas for COVID response. Call to action is that we need to continue mobilizing resources to ensure the response continues, heighten risk communication, reinstitute restrictions of public gatherings and people to adhere to those, strict enforcement of the public health measures by all, and also increased infection prevention at workplaces and other public places, also to ensure each sector and each individual plays their role effectively. This is the only way that we can ensure that we are able to manage this outbreak. In conclusion, I should emphasize that the COVID-19 pandemic is still ongoing. It hasn't finished and it's going to be with us for quite some time. We should know that. Cases in Zambia are increasing exponentially with high severity of disease. Number of deaths are likely to increase. There is need for us to protect vulnerable groups, particularly the very young and the elderly, and those who have underlying conditions, such as people with diabetes, hypertension, kidney diseases, and others. Also those who are immune compromised. And we should be very worried that currently high density areas or compounds are now getting affected. And therefore, we are likely to see an overwhelming in terms of number of cases. Chair, I submit that's my last slide. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Doc, for that presentation, well elaborated. And I'm sure most of the participants would obviously want to have a copy of the presentation just to go through and really reflect and understand and gain much more detail and insight. Yes, so you can, and also we encourage the participants to submit their emails to the hosts if you want a copy of the presentation, and it will surely be sent to you. Doc, we thank you so much for that. And I can also assure you that there's some questions that have come. Specifically, people have got questions. Others still think there are myths around all this, but you've clarified all that. Others are interested to find out the kind of medication being used. Others are just trying to find out if a vaccine is the way to go, because people are concerned and people just want to get back to their normal lives. But we understand that this challenge is a challenge for humanity as a whole. And Zambia is part of that global village, and which means that we are also affected. So definitely, we thank you once again for that, and questions will be submitted. We now switch on to the agriculture sector. We all know the importance of the agriculture sector in feeding the nation, in ensuring that there's food security. But the COVID pandemic has brought about its own challenges to the agriculture sector. Mind you, dear participants, we must understand that the agriculture sector had its own challenges. 2018, 2019, we had droughts, we had hunger in some cases, and there were challenges as well with some systems such as the FISIP and the e-voucher. So there's been this core group of challenges around the agriculture sector, varieties and food storage. Now, the COVID came in and also brought its own challenges. Produce has to move from the farms to the markets. There's been restrictions in different places. How are farmers able to cope? How are small-scale farmers that depend so much on the agriculture sector been able to cope with COVID? What have been some of the challenges that they have faced in view of COVID in ensuring that there's food security in the country? And the doc has just mentioned that COVID will be with us for some time. So what can we do to re-strategize our agriculture sector? And by agriculture sector, we just don't mean maize. We mean even other crops. Collectively, what forms our agriculture sector in Zambia. So with that, we'll be having a presentation from Dr. Rhoda Mofia Mukuka from IAPRI. And basically, she'll be sharing with us strategies, challenges, and opportunities for the agriculture sector in view of COVID, in ensuring that there is food security, in ensuring that our farmers are protected, both small-scale farmers, large-scale farmers. As a whole, collectively, we have to protect ourselves as a nation. We have to be cognizant of food reserves and all that discussion. So at this point in time, we hand over to Dr. Mofia for 15 minutes to submit on the agriculture sector. Dr. Mofia, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kaunda, and thank you to PMRC for this great initiative. I also have some slides to share. Just let me know, Mr. Kaunda, if you're able to see my slides.
Yes, the slide is on the screen, look. You may proceed. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
You can go into full mode just to have the broader screen. Yes, thank you. That's
okay,
fine.
it's already in full mode?
Yes, thank you.
All right.
Please go ahead, 15 minutes.
Thank you so much. So like already alluded to, my focus is on agriculture. You have given a very good background, Mr. Kaunda, worked well so much on that. So my presentation outline is as follows. I'll give a very short introduction to the sector, and then I will talk about some of the effects so far of COVID-19 on the sector. And then I will also look at some of the recovery strategies that need to be put in place. So not only are we talking about post-COVID recovery strategies, because we don't know when the pandemic will end. So we need to also focus on some of the short and medium-term measures that need to be put in place. Then I'll also look at some of the long-term recovery strategies and end with a very short conclusion of the presentation. So to start with, as already alluded to by the previous speakers, the outbreak of the pandemic is rapidly spreading in Zambia, and it is affecting many lives as well as the livelihood of many households. All sectors are basically affected, as we've already heard. But the agriculture sector is likely to be affected the most. And this is because a large population, or a large proportion of the population, is engaged in this sector. From the latest living conditions monitoring survey, we note that almost 60% of the households in Zambia are engaged in direct production of either crops or livestock or both. And this is a sector that also employs a lot of women and the youth. If you go to the rural areas, any youth who's not doing anything, most of them, they'll be farming. And we know we have a huge concern of youth and unemployment. So this sector actually plays a key role in engaging the youth as well as the women. And there's also a very close association between women economic activities and the household food security. When women are involved in economic activities that are bringing in income, you find that even the household food security is enhanced. But for this sector, in addition to the COVID pandemic, the sector has already suffered major challenges. We've had a lot of climate-related challenges, such as the droughts. At some point last year, we had some areas being flooded. We also experienced some armyworms. So this sector has already suffered a lot of challenges. And now with the coming of the COVID-19, we see that these challenges had already disrupted or slowed down the value chains. The COVID-19 is likely to even worsen this situation. But the problem we have as at now, it's very difficult to even state how much the COVID-19 is affecting the sector, because for now, there's no reliable data at national level that can tell how much effect or impact the pandemic is having on the sector. There have been a few studies or surveys done at small scale, which I may refer to during the presentation. So before we even look at what strategies to put in place, it's important to acknowledge what effect has been there. So basically in agriculture, we find that the food system itself, and I want to focus on the food system because this is closely related to health. If somebody has to develop a very strong immune system against the pandemic or against COVID-19, they have to eat well. So you need good food to have a very strong immune system. So my focus will be on the food system. So the food system is basically just a complex of activities that happens around the process from production until consumption. And now we also look at food waste. So look at some of the effects that have been affected by the COVID-19. And we have two sides of the coin. So there's the demand side as well as the supply side. From the demand side, we've seen rise in unemployment, which has severely reduced people's purchasing power. So when people don't have enough income, they will not be able to purchase the produce which the farmers are selling. And we've also seen this has been caused by significant job losses that have been seen, particularly in the tourism industry, manufacturing industry, and the service industry. You can imagine there could have been some of the companies that have been supplying food to some hotels. We've seen some hotels closing down, some restaurants at some point were all closed down. So all that affected the purchasing power of all those that were working for those companies. And then also reduction in direct demand for agricultural produce due to downscaling or closure of some of the sectors. The schools are a good example. And we know that the schools are a very big market for agricultural produce, especially the boarding schools. So if we had some suppliers to those schools, right now they are not able to supply, and that has affected their purchasing power. From the supply side, agricultural output is likely to fall, mainly because of the reduced demand, which I've alluded to. Then also there are some supply chains, businesses such as transporters, processors, traders, that are likely to reduce their activities, and this will directly affect production. If farmers produce, there's no one to transport, then they won't produce anymore. So that will directly affect production. And that will now directly affect the rural incomes. And when the incomes fall, the farmers will not reinvest. They won't buy inputs for further production. So that will affect production. Then we've also seen some disruptions in labor survey, where some people unfortunately succumb to the disease, while others may be spending more time in taking care of the sick. So that also tends to affect production. And then from a small survey that was conducted by IAPRI in April this year, we asked some households to indicate how COVID-19 or whether COVID-19 has affected their food security. And what we got was that 95% of the respondents indicated that yes, their food security had already been affected, and that was by April. This was a small sample, of course. We had about 730 respondents. There was another recent study done by World Bank where they interviewed 1,602 respondents. And the results showed that 80% of the households experienced a drop in income, especially from non-farm businesses. About 33% experienced reduction or even disappearance of their wages. So these were workers who were working, they lost their jobs, so their wages are no longer coming in. And again, from the survey we did as IAPRI, we also wanted to understand how COVID-19 has affected their livelihoods. And as you can see, about 50% indicated that their businesses had become very slow, and that was in April. So by now, probably things could even be worse. And then we had a lot of other responses. Others indicated that they were unable to work due to health concerns. The social distancing or the organizations have asked them to stay home. What are some of the recovery strategies? Like I mentioned, I'll start with the short and medium term strategies. We need to do something about production. We need to do something about markets, and eventually that affects livelihoods. Indicators of livelihoods could be household income, could be food security, could be how much assets the household has. So one thing is that we need to identify the silver lining of COVID-19. The past presenters mentioned that in every situation, of course, there's a positive side of things which we could take advantage of. We've seen disruptions in international food supply, which has been caused by lockdowns in those countries and restrictions of the movements of goods. And we've also seen some closures of supermarkets. So from such, these are just two examples. From such, there are opportunities for local production. And for innovative farmers, depending on what you are producing, this can be a very huge opportunity which should be taken advantage of. There are food crops that we know are on very high demand now, like garlic, ginger, lemon, avocado. If you specialize or you diversify to start producing these crops, you are likely to succeed now, even when things are going bad for other sectors. There are also opportunities in aggregation, where you collect food supplies from farmers, and then you supply to the supermarkets or to the end buyers. There's a gap that has been created by the closure of some of these supermarkets. There were some aggregators that were contracted by these supermarkets. And now that these supermarkets have closed, new aggregators can take advantage of that and supply to the end users. So what we are saying is this can be a win for innovative farmers. So what are some of the policy things that need to be put in place to support these innovative farmers, to enable the farmers take advantage of the situation to supply or to produce more local foods? So we are saying we need to pay special attention to the sector. And one of the key things is to upscale the budgetary allocation to the sector. If I can just give you an impression of what is happening as at now, in the last 4 years, we've seen the agricultural budget reduce from 9.4% of the total national budget to about 3.7%. From the 2020 budget that was presented last year, we only saw about 3.7% that was allocated to the agricultural sector. And yet at continental level, the African Union estimates that for an agricultural sector to succeed in any country, you need at least 10% of the total budget devoted to agriculture, for the simple reason that we already acknowledge that there are more people, there are more people in the country that work in the agriculture sector than in any other sector. Then if we dissect that agricultural budget, we find that almost 50% of it goes to what is called poverty reduction programs. So 49% of that agricultural budget goes to poverty reduction programs. And under poverty reduction programs, there are two programs that get almost the entire budget for those programs. And these are the FISIP and the FRA. If you sum what is going to the eFISIP, which is the e-voucher, the FRA, and some of the arrears that need to be paid for the two programs, you find that this is almost 90%, if not 100% of the poverty reduction programs. So you find that other programs under poverty reduction programs don't receive anything. And if you look at FISIP and FRA, which part or subsect of agriculture we supporting most? These two programs mostly support maize production. And if you look at how land is used under cultivation, you find that most of it goes for maize production. This is the proportion of land that is, the proportion of the total area that is cultivated, which is devoted to maize production. More than half of what is cultivated is actually maize. And this is because of the support, the policy support or policy emphasis on maize production. And about 90% of the households produce maize. And yet we are talking of diversifying and succeeding and looking at what crops are of high value that can enable the farmers get the best prices. The next crop is groundnuts. And if you see the difference between 53% and 9.6%, there's a huge difference. So you see that most of the efforts, the policy efforts, is on maize production. And yet, as a country, we are very blessed. This map is showing us the four regions. These are agroeconomic regions, which shows the different climates and what is suitable in which crops and livestock can be kept in those areas. So we are blessed, unlike countries like Botswana, where in some areas nothing can grow. In Zambia, literally everything can grow everywhere. So you find that, beg your pardon, crops like cassava, sorghum, millets, cashew nuts, livestock, fisheries, soybeans, paprika, literally everything can grow in this country. So we need to take advantage of that. So how can we make things work? What efforts do we need to put in place to make those innovative farmers succeed? First of all, we need to enhance and also innovate our public extension services. Because of the pandemic, where there's need to keep social distancing, there can be innovative ways like SMSs. You acknowledge that most of the rural people do actually have phones. So even SMSs, they might not have smartphones, but at least they can receive SMSs. Use of community radio stations. So we need to be a bit more innovative. Intensified market information. There are already some efforts.
Okay. Dr. Murphy, are you with us? Okay, dear participants, I think we might have a network challenge from Dr. Murphy's end. So probably we will definitely have to switch to the next sector, because I think the time had even elapsed. If Dr. Murphy comes back on, we shall definitely get back to her. So I think at this point in time, we just want to thank Dr. Murphy for that well-elaborated presentation on the agriculture sector. I think we have all seen the dynamics that are at play, especially that the purchasing power is being affected. The purchasing power is being affected from the households to be able to buy the produce that our farmers are actually producing. But also another critical aspect that has come out is the fact that this is a time to get innovative as farmers, because there are certain crops that have been mentioned that almost everyone wants to buy now in form of prevention, or at least helping ourselves, such as garlic, ginger, and the like. And so it shows that we might need to be innovative in that line. But also the dynamics that she showed between the household itself, the farm itself, and the market, what is actually pertaining now? Are farmers getting value for money, even as they produce? What about what goes into their production costs as well? So I think that was a very, very well elaborated presentation. that we shall also share with our participants. And for those that have questions, please continue sending through those questions. Dr. Mofia will be here to actually answer those questions. At the end of the day, we want to ensure that there's food security in Zambia. We want to ensure that even if COVID prolongs, we are still able to sustain ourselves as a nation as well. So thank you so much, Dr. Mofia, for that presentation. Distinguished participants, we go to our second last presentation, which is the mining sector. And then lastly, there will be the tourism sector. So with the mining sector, we'll be having a Zambia Chamber of Mines. And the presenter from Zambia Chamber of Mines is the Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Sokwani Chilembo, who is going to give us the perspectives from the mining sector. We have seen quite a lot happening in the mining sector. Even today, as we speak, one newspaper in the land has a headline on the mining sector talking about the issue of VAT refunds and the mines. But also we know that restrictions globally have affected the mining sector. Value chains have been affected. The mines in Zambia also are saying that their cost of production has actually gone high because now they have to actually look into the welfare of the miners by bringing in all these other measures, safety and precaution measures, and that has a bearing into their operation costs as well. Then there is the issue of the Chamber of Mines has continued to call on government to actually come and engage to bring about some relief, and also ensuring that government lives by its commitment of paying out the VAT refunds as well to the mining sector to help the mines to actually continue to run, because we all know that ultimately mining sector for Zambia is the #1 income earner as well. So having said that, at this point in time, we invite the Zambia Chamber of Mines to give us a submission or presentation for 15 minutes.
Moderator, all protocols observed, and I thank you for the opportunity to make this presentation today. I hope I can be heard clearly.
Yes, you are quite clear. Please, you can go ahead.
Quite clear. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Just trying to set up the presentation screen, and we'll take it from there. Okay. Take it. Okay, I hope
it is loading. It is loading.
Oh, it's loading. Okay. All right. Thank you very much for the opportunity to make this presentation.
Right. Thank you. It's on the screen now. Thank you, sir.
Yes. All right. No. So thank you very much for the opportunity to make this presentation. Your forum is very timely because as an industry, there was concern raised by a lot of our members that the discussion around COVID and our present economic circumstances was really focused on large events as opposed to the synthesis of an actual plan and way out. So the industry put together a report with the intention of stirring just the kind of discussion and debate that we're having today in a multi-sectoral sense, with a view to us as industry and as all stakeholders, beginning to discuss the very, very challenging matter of how we will get out of where we are and to bankably bridge the gap between where we are now and back to the growth vision of the 7th National Development Plan. So with those few introductory words, I'll go straight into our presentation. So the Road to Recovery is a report that we released a couple of weeks ago, which is in quite wide circulation and can be downloaded from our website. That is actually looking at making the discussion move more towards problem solving our way out of where we are. So it's just the economic outlook, policy interventions for a post-recovery, financing and economic recovery, and the long-term policies specific to the mining sector, which are required to get us forward. The reality of our circumstances has been that output in emerging and developing economies is likely not to recover to 2019 levels until 2022. And economic growth in sub-Saharan Africa is declining from a 2.4% growth in last year to about 5.1% reduction. In Zambia, we are also expecting a contraction of the order of 5%. So prior to COVID, we did have fiscal weaknesses with our debt situation, both international and local, external debt and local debt. And copper production has actually begun to come off the high that we saw in 2018, with the Chamber's members coming in below 800,000 tons as of last year. So with this, against this backdrop, we find that just like everyone else in the private sector, the mining sector is on edge as well. You can see from the Impact Capital Africa survey that was carried out in June of 2020, there is a high proportion of overall businesses that are at risk or see themselves at risk of business failure. And in the mining and mining services sector, the sentiment is even higher. We're looking at 48% in overall businesses, and in our mining sector, it's 50 to 60% of people who are in the sector and in the sector value chains. Now, what has this translated into in terms of the impact on the industry? If we look at Q2 of this year, we saw a drop in revenue, partly attributable, 18%, due to the challenges of the lockdowns in the route to port and into port of the high seas, and also in reductions of revenue due to the price impact of the COVID pandemic. So this led to a drop in our mineral royalty contribution in US dollars, and industry as a whole is therefore a lot more cash constrained than previously. Now, what needs to be done, and the document that we're sharing with you now builds upon prior submissions that had been made to government around the time of the pandemic, is industry had actually proposed a multi-stage response. The first portion of this response being the need to protect livelihoods and lives. So this comes from utilizing or mobilizing and utilizing cooperating partner support to improve the capabilities of healthcare systems, so that in any industry, including our own, the communities where we operate and our employees can actually be protected from the ravages of the pandemic, and to see how we might be able to cooperate with government and with the sector and with our immediate communities to try and bring the curve down, the incidence curve of COVID, that is. And in parallel, there is need to begin to prepare for providing emergency financial lifelines to both citizens and companies going forward. Citizens, this is critical because, as you've seen from recent experience, going into lockdown is very distressful for the majority of our population who live in a daily subsistence fashion. So companies are no different. Companies are also facing challenges. So government did receive substantial commitments towards the COVID cause, and did make the innovation of introducing the COVID bond in order to be able to meet the challenge of actually protecting lives themselves. With regard to the challenge of protecting livelihoods, I'll just go back briefly. We do note that government's social transfer initiative is on the rise, and that this, as a primary mechanism of also protecting livelihoods for those outside of the formal net is something that is a step in the right direction. Now, protecting the rest of livelihoods in the productive economy really means protecting key industries and viable businesses so that they can pull along the rest of the economy with them. And for us, some of these key industries are the sector that was presenting just before us, and of course, mining as well. Company cash flow is the biggest risk that is being faced under COVID. As you have seen in the mining sector, this arises from price erosion and from logistical challenges, and to some extent also the increased cost of operating under the COVID regime, because we've changed our shift patterns, we've changed how we do certain things, we've changed how we transport our staff, all with a view to maintaining social distancing to reduce the incidence of the pandemic within our environment. But just like every other business in the Republic of Zambia, we are constrained for capital. And so we, just like the rest of industry had submitted via Zaki, are looking at some elements of tax holiday and relief for everything to do with what we move in to the country to deal with the COVID pandemic. But there were also appeals which were partially acceded to by the Minister of Finance, where reliefs from late payment penalties and interest were extended. And these are really just the first step that's required to getting industry back onto its feet. Definitely settling the nation's domestic arrears is another priority area which the minister has already focused on. We've seen dismantling of local debt to suppliers being given priority, but we also do have a historical VAT situation as an industry. And we actually view this as an opportunity, the lowest hanging fruit opportunity for government to stimulate the economy by restoring the VAT cycle. As an industry, we do not require this to come in cash. It can be by offset if we can actually be incentivized to grow, and we'll deal with what is required for us to be able to do so. Now, to facilitate a post-crisis economic recovery, we need to move the conversation to how are we going to grow so that we are good to repay any funds that we mobilize from the international community. We can have either a V-shaped swift recovery if the correct conditions are in place, a U-shaped slower recovery if we take half measures, and there could be permanent diminishment of our economic circumstances if we do not respond in a timeless fashion. So for the mining sector, just like everybody else, we are all really looking to government to restructure its debt, review its operating expenditure, but more so, attract investment necessary for us to begin to rebuild our industries that are currently on the back foot, even pre-COVID, as you saw from the production curve and from what you've heard with regard to our cash position. So the situation in which we find ourselves as a country, and this is the conversation which the industry is really looking to drive or to have everybody contribute to, is that the revenue that we collect is leading to a funding gap when compared to our non-debt related costs, and settling these domestic arrears, suppliers, VAT, not just to the mining industry, but across the entire economy. And there is also a need to deal with our debt restructuring separately. But in a two-step process, what the industry is actually trying to bring to the fore in conversation is that we need to move from where we are presently, which is presented in this slide, to a situation where we have revenue and assistance coming in from donors that can allow us to be able to manage debt servicing costs that are renegotiated under the Lazard Brothers contract, meet our non-debt related costs, and also be able to settle our domestic arrears. This is because as an industry, we require a stimulus via reductions in taxes to be able to begin to grow and meet that 1 million ton milestone in a couple of years. If we don't get that relief, it will be difficult to incubate that growth. And if we do get that relief, there will be pressure on domestic revenue collection.
Sorry, Mr.
And
Chilembo,
look at the situation that we're looking
2 minutes remaining, please. Thank you.
Yes. So this is the situation that we would like industry and all players out there to put our minds to securing by speaking to the same goal of motivating confidence in the international community to come on board and help us and to incubate growth with the mining sector as a bedrock. If we continue to overburden the mining sector with tax, we'll see a decline in revenue as distress sets into the sector. The sector is key, and when it is thriving, the Human Development Index also rises with it. This is historical, and underpinning this growth, we had the creation of new mines. Presently, the cost of capital is out of reach of the industry because of the taxation regime, and basically what we need to do is to manage our optics with regard to the market so that we can inspire confidence, make ourselves competitively taxed in comparison to our competing markets, and create an economic recovery taxation regime. Now, this has been done before, so it is a low-risk means of restarting the economy. We did it when Sentinel Mine opened in the earlier in the decade. It brought in billions of US dollars, raised FDI, raised the GDP performance, and we already actually have another candidate to push us in this direction through Luvambe Mine. It has 10 million tons of copper presently, but with the circumstances the way it is, they are unable to raise financing to actually build this mine and kickstart the growth that we need. So what the industry is saying is, give us some relief on the taxation side. We will go out, mobilize the capital and drive growth so that there will be a growth in revenue collections over time, which will enable us to settle whatever commitments we secure from the international community. So we are looking to move the conversation to this level. Let us put out a plan which everybody can buy into that can change the negative narrative that is being written for us out there, because we are discussing things piecemeal and people are putting together the picture for us. If we can come together and discuss this rationally and in a pragmatic fashion and look at it from a high level, we can actually take control of the narrative, because the fundamentals are great in the business that we are in of copper mining. Copper demand is strong, and we need to take advantage of it and not be flat-footed as we see our colleagues in Zimbabwe who are failing to take advantage of the gold boom and the platinum metals boom. And our story is even better than Botswana's. Their sales have dropped 96% of diamonds. We do have a good story, but we need to put it together coherently and secure international support through this. This is the intent of our report. This is the intent of this presentation, and we think it aligns very well with what this platform is promoting. With those few words, I'd like to thank all of you and invite the moderator to proceed.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chilembo, for that well-elaborated presentation that, of course, has shed more light on the realities around the mining sector. I think this brings about perspectives that perhaps we have been talking about in relation to the kind of relief that the mining sector needs, and especially that it gives that assurance to the government to say, give us relief in form of from some of these taxes, let us drive the growth. I think that is a very critical aspect, and also the statistics that you have put through of the potential that exists in different mines and asking for that enabling environment from the government side. So I must make mention that these submissions that have been put through today will be compiled by PMRC and, of course, the experts who have presented, and we're going to come up with a reform proposal that will be submitted to the government for action, because we believe that this is what we need moving forward, and this is coming from the sectors themselves with understanding of the realities of the challenges that are happening amidst COVID. And I think, once again, thank you so much for that submission. There will be questions coming through for the mining sector as well, just after the last presentation. So just to let our participants know, we are going to the last presentation now from tourism. After that, we are going into plenary. So please, those with questions, we have the experts here. Those that have sent through questions, thank you for that. And we still encourage others to continue sending through questions. So for the tourism sector, ladies and gentlemen, we know how the challenge has been in terms of people have lost jobs in the industry. It has had its challenges, especially in terms of tourism arrivals. I think the numbers that we projected at the beginning of the year is not what is happening now because of lockdowns in the rest of the world. We haven't received those numbers. So what happens to our tourism sector? Further, we had also closed our sites in Zambia. The Victoria Falls was closed and other sites as well were closed. But we've seen the role that Livingstone Tourism Association has been playing. When the president visited Livingstone to open the falls, I think LTA was on hand. And we know that LTA is trying to drive this agenda of ensuring that we try to open up, but with caution, and also promoting domestic tourism, but more so importantly, also to understand how several jobs can be protected in the tourism industry, because it employs quite a lot of people, and its contribution to GDP must also be maintained, but in cognizant that we're not receiving as many flights as we've been receiving coming into Zambia, and also the tourist arrivals have continued to decline. So with that background, we hand over to the chairperson of the Livingstone Tourism Association, Mr. Rodney Skumba, who is going to give us a submission, and this is our last presentation for today, who's going to give us a submission on the tourism sector for 15 minutes. Mr. Skumba, over to you. Thank you.
Good morning, moderator. I think you would have already covered my presentation from your intro. I'm not sure what I need to do to continue this conversation.
No, you are the expert, sir. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank PMRC for having invited we, the LTA, and obviously the tourism sector as a whole, to just come and share some of our insights of what has been happening within the tourism sector and Livingstone to be specific. I will just share my screen shortly. I hope I'm audible enough and my screen is loaded.
Yes, it is on the screen, please proceed.
Okay. Okay, so just a bit background about the Livingstone Tourism Association. The association is non-profit. We set it up the main agenda or the main mandate of the LT obviously act as a liaison between the private sector and the private sector. We're talking about big hotels, the miners, through all the way to the tour operator, to the curio trader and the taxi driver. And obviously, with that in place, we coordinate, implement, and evaluate activities that, in essence, will make Livingstone as a preferred destination for all. Now, one of our key milestones that we performed as the LTA was in 2014, when we signed up a collective bargaining agreement with the Ministry of Labour, which obviously set up a joint industrial council. Now, this in itself was set up to harmonize labor relations, industrial labor relations between we, the operators, as well as our employees, who we strongly feel play a very, very cardinal role with the way our service is delivered within the tourism sector. Now, we're definitely talking about COVID and its impact. I think from the time the pandemic was declared, we did notice that Livingstone, as well as the whole country, the whole world, had a big impact with regards to the tourism sector. We were declared as one of the hard-hit sectors world over. All travel restrictions were implemented in every other country. So you notice that the International Air Transport Association, IATA, has shown a financial loss of between 63 billion and 113 billion up to March 2020. Now, that in itself tells you the extent of how much people are unable to travel or how much people have cancelled in terms of bookings. It was a big knock. We are still on our knees, and at some point, we always don't even know what we're going to do. Now, we do realize, and I'm happy that even in the sequence of this presentation, we noticed that we picked the 3 specific sectors in Zambia, which have been highlighted within the 7th National Development Plan: agriculture, mining, and tourism. So our contribution as at 2019 was sitting at 7%, which I think is a dismal contribution, if I could say so myself. But ultimately, what you notice that we were planning to get to double digits come 2020, but alas, COVID-19 came and showed its wrath. So the industry, obviously, like I mentioned, contributed about $1.7 million and 7.2% contribution to employment within the particular sector. Now, to give you a more realistic picture of the impact of COVID, which I'm going to delve in quite a bit, will be the estimated business loss that we have experienced in the country as Zambia. Now, this slide in itself tells you exactly all the particular players that we have within the tourism sector. Here we're talking about tourism development areas where we belong as Livingstone, Zambezi, the Kafue National Park, South Luangwa. All these places are ones which have been highly affected. Now, those numbers that we're posting there pretty much give us an estimate of the revenue loss that COVID-19 has impacted on tourism in Zambia. Now, you may have heard the Minister, Honorable Ronald Chitotela, make mention to say, look, we have lost in excess of about 300 million just from the time that COVID, in the 2 quarters of the year. Now, that in itself is purely based on our projected figures that we're expecting to get. But you do realize that tourism is a service industry. We have a lot of these other requisite sectors that support tourism. It could be manufacturing, it could be agriculture, sometimes maybe mining, but ultimately there's so many linkages that are formed within the tourism sector, which obviously we call it as a service industry. So if I'll just draw your attention to 2 particular numbers on that slide. Number 1 is the total revenue loss. Now, again, I'll be very specific. This is estimated, which is in excess of about 417 million. Now, that in itself also translated into a potential employment loss, be it in tourism proper or other related services supplying tourism, which comes to about in excess of about 65,000 jobs. Now, that in itself throws us in a big quandary. It throws us in a shake. It throws us in a situation of not understanding how we're going to what's going to happen. Assuming that the status quo remains as is, what is it that we're going to do? We, the players, as well as our counterparts from the government side. Now, if I can narrow it down to Livingstone as a sector, obviously, which I preside over, the seasonal income chart within Livingstone looks like this. On average and traditionally, we have sold Livingstone from March, thereabouts, up to August. You can tell that our revenue, our big business is from March to, then it peaks in August and then starts to dip. Simply because we have traditionally sold our destination with emphasis on the Victoria. Now, we're trying to make sure that we get out of that yoke. We make people believe that there's more to Livingstone than the Victoria Falls, so that at least this graph that you're seeing will be able to be a little bit more steady rather than you have a spike and then suddenly you have a dip. So that in itself is how it works. Now, this is without COVID. This is business as usual. That's how revenue is, like seasonal chart. Then now, if you look at our income, now this is 2020. This is COVID. Livingstone in COVID. Our revenues, we stretch it to about 12 years to just get to have a feel of how tourism has been fared. one thing you need to draw your attention to on this particular slide is that even without COVID, we noticed that the revenues within the tourism sector, which obviously is a source of concern to us, effectively from 2008, the numbers should have been going up. But we've seen a couple of issues that I'll deal with along the way, which we think have not been dealt with to ensure that the revenues within the tourism sector continue going up. So the revenues within the tourism sector ensure that we get into double-digit GDP contribution. So that in itself shows you exactly what has happened just in the first quarter of the year. Already we're looking at a dip of about 40% on our revenues. We had very big cancellations. People stopped traveling. Our domestic market also froze in March. That's when we actually got into the first lockdown. So it was a disaster in the long and short. Now, what we're looking at again here is the stretched. I keep on hearing our colleagues saying, what if you were asked what 2020 was all about, I would not tell you anything. So we looked at how our 2020 was going to be. We looked at 2020, imagine ourselves to say, look, maybe after the second quarter, our plan was that most of our books were going to be moved from the first and second quarter to the last quarter, and then we're going to have a big boom with regards to business. But again, you may have heard from our colleague from the Institute of Public Health, the COVID continues to mutate. The COVID just tends to change its complexion almost every day. So now it has thrown us off balance. We don't really know what to do. So that in itself, the slide you're looking at gives you a particular picture of how Livingstone revenue were done. So without posting a gloomy picture, obviously there's a few things that we need to look into. Policy options for recovery. Not so long ago, 2-3 weeks ago, our colleagues from the Zambia Tourism Agency did sit with us, see how best we could create a recovery plan. And that recovery plan is something that would actually form a bedrock of how we're going to proceed as a sector. And obviously, among other things, which we as an association, through our parent association, council rather, the Tourism Council of Zambia, have submitted to the Ministry of Tourism for onward submission to Minister of Finance, is one, but not limited to, the issue of landing fees at the airport. Livingstone continues to being an expensive destination, perceived to be an expensive destination because most airlines do not land in Livingstone. If you're going to compare between Zimbabwe and ourselves, we realize that there's more flights that land in Victoria Falls Airport as opposed to Harry Mangakungula International Airport. That is the one thing that needs to be dealt with so that we make sure that we have more arrivals. Number two, the issue of VAT. VAT continues to be a thorny issue in the tourism sector. We have insisted time and again to say, allow the tourism sector to remove the VAT on package tours. That in itself will make tourism very competitive, both domestic as well as international. Our colleagues within our neighboring countries do not charge the VAT. Yes, everybody would say, but where would government get its money to run? But as a private sector, we are committing to saying that the more money we get to make, the more we're going to be paying in corporate tax. And obviously, with our hands on our chest, we could always insist that everybody pays whatever, give Caesar what belongs to Caesar, they say. The issues to do with bed levy within the parks has continued to being an issue. We do realize that most of our facilities within Livingstone, within Kafue National Park, South Luangwa, Lower Zambezi, they sit in the park. So the Department of Parks and Wildlife does get revenue out of those. So for us to get to stimulate the sector within ourselves as domestic, it's very important that once those charges are waived off, the locals can start accessing those particular facilities which are sitting in the park, which I think are a very good marvel. Multiple licensing, restaurants, normal businesses, we have too many licenses that are being charged within it. But then we're saying, okay, fine. Fortunately, government has come up with the aspect of having to bring in the issues of the Business Regulatory Review Agency, which will now create a single licensing for most of the operators, which we very much welcome, but obviously it needs to be actualized. Visas. The issues of visas need to be taken very seriously, especially now that we're getting out of this almost opening up the world and the skies altogether. The visa regime needs to be dealt with very, very decisively, and in the sense that visitors would like to come into Zambia. But what is key is, are they able to access the visa at point of entry, or how quickly is it to access it on the internet? Very quickly, you have to pre-apply. Those are some of the things that we need to look into. Park fees, like I mentioned earlier, what we need to do is to ensure that we get to stimulate the domestic market as is, and obviously to make sure that the regional market also starts to get into understanding what Zambia is all about. Now, just to go back to visas, we do realize that the first point of call that we have to work on right now is domestic, stimulate domestic market. Then the next phase would be to stimulate the region, SADC. We do have the Kaza Uni visa, which obviously we need to market between ourselves and the Zambia Tourism Agency to make sure that the rest of the world knows that in Zambia you can access the Kaza Uni visa. Even our colleagues within South Africa and everybody else within the region should be able to just know that once you get your Kaza Uni visa, you can access the 5 countries, namely Zambia, Zimbabwe, Botswana, Namibia, and Angola. Perfect opportunity, and I'm reliably told that within the Kaza itself, we're creating packages specifically for those particular regions, and those particular activities will be targeted at whichever foreign market as well as domestic. Now, yes, we'll be talking about all these things to be put in place. Now, what role do we have to play as locals to ensure that we participate within the tourism sector? For a very long time, you will realize that tourism to the locals has been alien in the sense that they strongly feel it should be.
Mr. Skumba, you have 2 minutes to wind up, sir. Thank you.
Okay. What is very, very key, moderator, in this case is we would like to encourage, we've got a document called the Zambia Tourism Master Plan this year. Our locals, both domestic as well as foreign investors, should come into Zambia to ensure that the sites that we're talking about, which are identified within the Tourism Master Plan on the structure plan that I've shared, we're talking about Lower Zambezi, Livingston, South Lwangwa, Kafue, and obviously the Northern Circuit. We have opportunities. We don't have to wait for a Salim from Nigeria to come and put up a chalet in Lower Zambezi, and then we want to start complaining to say, no, but why is he charging so much? He's going to be calling his brothers from Nigeria to come and stay in that particular place. But we want a roadmap to set up a camp in Lower Zambezi, and I'll be calling my brothers and sisters to come and imagine again if the world were to close down yet again. Flying, borders are closed, airlines are grounded. What is it that we're going to do? Where do we go? Everybody is just going to shut down. Our brothers and sisters are going to be destitute. Is that what we want? No, we need to sustain. And that's the reason why even the president said business continues. What we just need to make sure is ensure that strict guidelines are adhered to, making sure that we manage the visitors that are coming into our places, and ensure that everything else is fine. I would have loved to leave the presentation with a very nice video which just summarizes exactly what we're going to say. It won't take much, moderator, but that's it. For me, that's the end. I'll just play the video.
All right, thank you, Mr. Skumba.
Can you hear it?
Is a multi-sensory.
Yes, it's starting. It's starting, but it's not that clear. I think that it's a network issue, perhaps.
Oh, just give me 1 minute.
Okay.
technology sometimes it just, one moment.
Take in the mighty Zambezi River, the majestic Victoria Falls that form Zambia's natural southern border, and the national parks overflowing with wildlife. Immerse yourself in the fast-growing town, teeming with history, life, and life. Then visit vast lakes that seek to touch the soul and engage with a plethora of different ethnic groups, cultures, and languages. Together, they make up the intricately woven fabric of this remarkable country. To visit Zambia is to begin a love affair that will never be exhausted, and unlike any that you have ever experienced before. For all the superlatives that man has used in his attempts to describe Victoria Falls, none are able to do this incredible natural wonder justice. You have to see it for yourself. It is a truly awe-inspiring experience. Livingston, once Zambia's capital, and the Zambian side of the falls have become a mecca for discerning adventure tourists. Peer into the abyss from Devil's Pool at the edge of the falls. Career down the powerful rapids from Batoka Gorge in a whitewater raft. Bungee jump from the historic Victoria Falls Bridge. Or fly over the falls on a flight of angels. Whatever activity you choose, you'll be left with a renewed appreciation for the sheer might of nature. Kafue National Park is amongst the biggest in Africa and is home to more than 130 species of mammal and more than 400 bird species. Enjoy the wildlife from a different perspective on a boat cruise or a canoeing or walking safari. For sheer density of game, South Luangwa National Park is second to none. It certainly lives up to its nickname as the Valley of the Leopard. The stunning Liuwa Plains play host to the world's second largest wildebeest migration and boast some of the most striking vistas you will see anywhere in Africa. At Kasanka National Park, you can view the largest mammal migration in the world when each November, literally millions of fruit bats cover the skyline as the sun sets. Zambia's bodies of water are as abundant as its wildlife. Although it is landlocked, this country has more water than any other in Africa. There are the long, meandering rivers, some of which are interspersed by waterfalls that are only narrowly surpassed by big falls. Then there are the lakes, from the vast, remote Lake Tanganyika, far in the north of the country, which is one of Africa's Great Lakes, to Lake Kariba, Africa's biggest man-made dam. Kariba is an increasingly popular beach holiday destination that is strangely reminiscent of the French Riviera. Or for the best bath of your life, visit the incredible Kapisha Hot Springs. Another unique aspect of this remarkable country are the Zambians themselves. The country is home to 72 different ethnic groups and languages, all of whom have their own diverse cultural traits and traditions. One thing they do have in common, they are all unfailingly warm and welcoming. Zambians are famous for their very own special brand of hospitality, as well as the pride they take in their Zambian identity. Wherever you go in Zambia, you will meet people who will go out of their way to leave you with a positive impression and make you feel at home. So what are you waiting for? Book your trip now and enjoy the kind of African experience you've always dreamt of. Whatever it is you're looking for, you can always be sure to find it somewhere in Zambia. So let's explore.
Okay, so that gives us pretty much a summary of what Zambia is all about and an opportunity for each and every one of us listening, participants, invest in tourism. The cake is big. We're waiting for you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Skuma, for that presentation on the tourism sector. Very elaborate, and also the videos as well, which continues to showcase the beauty of the land. And I think this is an open call to all of us as citizens to promote domestic tourism. I think it begins with mindset, even when the airports eventually open, it will be up to us to choose whether to go for a holiday in Zanzibar, Cape Town, or to go to Livingstone or Siavonga, just to promote our industry as well. I think it's also a contribution that we can make as citizens, but also there are challenges that you've put on how much has been lost by businesses. I think that those statistics rather are quite key in terms of us coming up with reform proposals to show how much also the Treasury has missed in terms of what would have been revenue in that instance. And I think that is an open call, and it was quite clear as well. So we now come to the part of plenary. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, the plan is if you have a question to any of the presenters that presented, kindly use the feature on the right side, which is a raised hand. So if you click that raised hand, we would know that you want to ask a question. And once we unmute you or ask to unmute, you would be given 30 seconds to ask your question straight to the point and who you are asking to. We've had presentations in 5 sectors: education sector, health sector, agriculture sector, mining sector, and the tourism sector as well. So we can see hands already, and we'll be getting to those now. But also we have some questions that we received earlier that we shall also be looking at. So we begin with Mr. Charles Bota. I think you can unmute and then ask your question. So Mr. Charles Bota, you can please go ahead.
I sent my question through. Thank you very much, moderator. I sent my question through to Rhoda. I think she has it if she wants to read it to save on time, and she can go. It was for the agribusiness sector. So Rhoda's got the question and she can answer.
Okay. Thank you for that. Dr. Mofia, if you have the question from Mr. Charles Bota, please go ahead to respond in a minute.
Thank you very much, and moderator, I'm so sorry about the internet disruption. I still had 4 slides, moderator, which I still need to present.
Yes,
anyway,
we shall give you that chance, Dr. Mofia. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So for now, the question from Mr. Bota was, there are great opportunities now. No, sorry, this wasn't. Okay, so his question is that everyone seems to see supermarkets, chain stores as their market. What is IAPRI's insight on space on supermarket shelves for locals and space on the informal market? What are the percentages for agricultural produce sold on supermarket shelves versus percentages in the informal sector?
Please go ahead, Dr. Mofia.
Yeah, so he's looking at the proportion of space in the supermarkets versus the proportion of space in the informal market for local produce. So this, for me, do I have to respond now or we wait for other questions?
Okay, we can wait for other questions so as to accommodate the other speakers and also give you a chance to still finish.
Yeah, because part of my response to this question relates to the few slides that I didn't show.
Okay, thank you. We'll give you time for that. Thank you. So at this moment in time, we go to Maria Michello. You can also unmute and direct your question. Maria Michello.
Hi, good afternoon. It's actually Mara, M-A-R-A.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you for the clarification. Mara Michello. Please go ahead.
Okay, my question is directed to Mr. Sikumba regarding domestic tourism. Firstly, I'm rather taken aback with the video. As a local entrepreneur, but also one that wants to take advantage of local tourism and explore my country, that video does not speak to me. I see so much white in it. It won't capture the interest and curiosity of a Zambian or a local person that wants to tour the country and also participate and contribute towards local tourism. So what are we doing to ensure that we market, but also we package tourism for the locals so that it becomes more attractive for us to actually explore and take advantage of what we have in our country? And then secondly, what sort of innovations are you applying to ensure that we can now start seeing the growth of the tourism sector? Because when we talk about tourism, everyone thinks of wildlife and campsites and whatnot. But there's a lot of opportunities, business opportunities within the tourism sector. What sort of innovations and ideas are you coming up with, especially to attract startups and young entrepreneurs that are setting up businesses and can take advantage of this whole ecosystem and the value chains within this sector?
Okay, thank you so much for that question. Mr. Sikumba, you can respond in less than a minute, sir.
Okay, just quickly, I do realize that concerns raised by Mara, and I think the pitfall that we created is exactly what it is now, where everything in Zambia was tailored towards the foreign market. Now, COVID itself has given us an opportunity to remodel, to change the narrative. What is it that we're going to do? Because even that video, obviously, like she rightly put it, was taken up by someone who does filming and the like. If we do have our locals who are able to go around all these places within Zambia to actually capture videos and bring out the authenticity of Zambia, the culture itself, then we're talking. So it starts from there. Ultimately, what we have seen today is just because the airlines are grounded, we can't have tourists. But each and every one of us is a tourist. So that is a start. Now, in terms of innovation obviously starts from where we have to start investing. It's not like you say, it's not just a camp. It's all these activities that we're talking about. We've got 40% of water in the SADC region. There's all these water-based activities on the Kafue National, in the Kafue River, in Bangoulu, which is Zambia, in Livingston, everywhere else. You can be jet boating, you can sunset cruises, everything, whatever you want to do, swimming, probably even snorkel. But what we need to do is ensure that we, the locals, take the driving seat and then push our agenda. For as long as we are going to sit on our laurels thinking that somebody is going to do it for us, it will continue being, it will continue speaking to the foreign market than it is talking to the domestic.
Okay, thank you so much for that response, Mr. Sikumba. We now go to Agre Mambwe. Please quickly ask your question. Thank you.
All right. My question is directed to Mr. Kotati. And I think the background to it is the fact that he was talking about the education sector investing in technical capacities for schools for us to be able to move to a point where we're able to offer remote teaching effectively. Now, as a teacher in the private schools, as well as someone who does some consultancy with other private schools, one of the things that the government did was to say that students or parents shouldn't be paying for school fees towards that. Doesn't that then disincentivize schools from investing in the infrastructure that he's talking about? Because what I noticed is when COVID just started, a lot of schools were eager to invest in this infrastructure. But then when they made that comment, everyone stopped. But for me, that was a very short-sighted policy pronouncement, because ultimately, whatever investments were going to be put in those infrastructure was going to overstay, it was going to go beyond the COVID pandemic. And those capacities that would have been built in there were going to benefit all of us. But by having that pronouncement, I think it's hindered a lot of that. So I would love to get a comment from what the thinking was with regard to that. And what's the way forward? Is that still the case? And how does it then think that we're going to invest in the infrastructure that is needed to promote remote teaching and e-learning?
All right, thank you. Thank you for the question. We will allow Mr. Kotati to respond to that question.
Thank you very much, moderator, and thank you very much for the question. I agree with the participant that the fact that we asked the schools not to charge was a negative development on its own. But I think the policy of the ministry is very clear. Just a minute. The policy of the ministry is very clear. We have talked to our schools that if they want to charge anything, they need to get authority from PS. The reason behind that is that we had, in the past, schools used to come up with all charges of every kind. And you discover that while those who get enough money were able to access, to manage to pay for school fees, others had a problem. And so as a way of controlling, the ministry has encouraged the schools to get authority before they can ask parents to charge any fees. And if a school can come up with a proposal to the PS that they would like to charge so much so that they can buy so many computers or whatever, I think the PS would be in a position to authorize. But we have also had the challenges with our officers. You discover that most of you are parents. One day the school will say, we'll start constructing a wall fence. When the wall fence is done, no one goes back to the parents to reduce the fees because the wall fence is been constructed. Instead, they will start buying the project to buy a bus. And then the amount will not come from what the parents were charging for the wall fence. The charge will be different. So in the end, you find that schools were asking for too much from parents. And that is the reason why PS has put a policy in place that any school that wants to charge anything to the parents should get authority from his office. And so even now, if a school came up with a proposal to justify why they want to charge a certain amount, the PS is in a position to give you authority. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you so much for that response. So we're going to go to David Chile. Kindly ask your question. After this, then we're going to read through some questions that we had. Please keep your question straight to the point. And also for our experts, if we can manage to answer in 40 seconds, 45 seconds to accommodate as many questions, that would be appreciated. So Mr. David Chile, kindly ask your question. Mr. David Chile, kindly unmute and ask your question.
Yes, if you can hear me, my point, yes, I'm not so much for questions. Rather, I would love to just state my statement after following the discussion. First of all, a lot of questions have been asked on government relief in terms of tax. I feel as Zambians, we need to begin to think innovatively rather than quickly asking for government relief on tax, because when we ask so much relief from government, we end up stretching government so much that they won't be able to respond to COVID, because they'll be in a position where the resources would be very much insufficient, because we know government has got a lot of things it's looking at, schools, salaries, and so forth. So let companies like the mines begin to think innovatively about how they are going to come out of this, rather than rushing to government for relief, because we just put more pressure on government. Then on the issue of agriculture, I think we got a lot of what they have said, but then even in agriculture, we need to begin to be innovative. My point here is, like farmers, we know that they need extension, and government is under pressure to provide services across the country. One way in which we can solve this is by using satellite TVs in rural areas, and this is what my organization is advocating for. We are trying to find ways of supplying farmers in rural areas with satellite solar TVs so that education can reach them via satellite. They can form groups, and then we support them that way. We increase agricultural productivity. The other point on agriculture is we need to advocate to government to reduce its support on FISIP and rather focus more on irrigation. Some of the money, maybe 50% of the money that goes to FISIP should be directed to irrigation, because we need to be producing maize, not just during the rain season, but throughout the year. Then we can export that maize to the Congo and raise money for Zambia. And then the other point is, we don't know where COVID is going to go. Maybe it's going to become worse and people find it very difficult to go to the market. So if within the market for selling cabbage.
We seem to have a challenge and noise in the background, so we've gotten a question. We've gotten a question, thank you. There's some noise in the background and also the network challenges. So we're going forward. We want to allow one more question, then Dr. Mofia is going to respond. Okay. Thank you, sir. So, Dr. Mofia, you can be on standby as you respond to this question. You will also finish your slides in 2 minutes. But let's also get one more question from Unzabeka, and this is Rhoda from Unzabeka. So Rhoda from Unzabeka, also kindly ask your question, after which Dr. Mofia will answer this question, the previous question, and finish the presentation. So Unzabeka, Rhoda, kindly ask your question.
Thank you so much, Mr. Salim, for this opportunity, and thank you to PMRC for making this possible. My question is towards Mr. Kotati. I wanted to find out, is the ministry taking active steps to ensure that students are mentally ready for this remote shift learning? So what are they doing to make sure that it's fully effective for students to be mentally prepared for this shift from being in a classroom towards being in working remotely, schooling remotely? Thank you.
Thank you so much for that brief and to the point question. So the order will be like this. Dr. Mofia can come in, respond to the previous question, and also finish the 4 slides quickly. And then Mr. Kotati can come in and answer to what Rhoda from Unzabeka has just asked. Then after this, we're going to read out some questions that we received. So Dr. Mofia, we're giving you 3 minutes to finish the presentation and also respond. Thank you.
Thank you, moderator. So I am trying to avoid the camera. So I just finished talking about the short-term measures. In the long term, what we need as a country is to build a sustainable and strong agriculture resilience. And to do so, we need to have intensified investment in irrigation, research, market infrastructure, and of course, access to finance, which is critical for investment for our farmers. I've heard the emphasis also on extension, which is also, it remains critical. And of course, for us to channel these resources to these investments, it means that we need to rethink how we allocate the resources to FISIP and FRA. And I'm happy that this is actually coming out strongly. So we need also to improve access to land, especially for the youth. I'm sure you agree with me on this point that most of the youth are having challenges in accessing land. Ultimately, what we need to see is a revolution in agriculture production. I think we need to cease doing business as usual. If we have to come out of this pandemic with effective measures to prevent even future shocks. So we need something like a revolution to rethink and start doing things differently. If we continue having markets like this, and this brings me to the Mr. Botta's question of the proportion that goes to the informal market. Yes, we know about 85% of the agriculture produce produce ends up in the informal markets, and only 15% ends up in the chain stores or in the supermarkets. But with such market infrastructure, it won't attract a lot of farmers to go into farming. So it is a chain. It is the part of the food systems where we need to ensure that even markets are put in place to allow the food to reach the consumers. Here, I just wanted to acknowledge some of the measures that government has put in place. I won't go through all of them in the interest of time. But also just to mention some of the efforts that we are doing as IAPRI in monitoring the impact of the pandemic. What we started doing from March was to monitor some of the food prices in the major markets. So we started with 3 districts, Ndola, Lusaka, and Kasama, but now we've upscaled to all the 10 provincial capitals. So what we want to monitor are the price trends. Is COVID-19 having impact on the prices? As you can see, in Lusaka, for beef, the price was already going up, Lusaka and Ndola. For Kasama, it was stabilizing. But let me just mention that for now, this is the 4th round. We may not have a significant trend that we can make conclusions on, because some of the prices is actually also influenced by the fact that this is a harvest period. There's a lot of food on the market. But for us to see even the impact of COVID-19, we need to compare the price this time and the price the same time last year. So mini meal, of course, has been dropping. And also this is because the fact that this is the time of harvest and we have plenty on the market. So in conclusion, of course, COVID-19 is a systematic challenge because it does not only affect the health sector, but it has a lot of implications on food security. Agriculture remains key if health security risks are to be reduced. Like I mentioned, people need to eat for them to have a strong immune system to fight the disease. Sometimes things have to be done differently to circumvent a potential hunger disaster in addition to, post-COVID-19. And then this is an opportunity to rethink sustainable agriculture in Zambia. We need to have innovative farmers who succeed out of or post-COVID or this time of the pandemic. Thank you very much, moderator.
Thank you, Doc. So you can respond to the question.
I'm sure part of the questions have been answered, especially the one that relates to informal markets. So the informal markets, we also understand that they also actually import a lot. So definitely there are gaps in there. Things that fruits used to be imported and land in the informal markets. So there are gaps in there which can be filled by local production. The question of FISIP, definitely we need to redirect the resources, to rethink. There was another question that came through my inbox asking whether it is okay for government to allocate $1 million in terms of FRA purchases, and whether that does not just discourage the private sector. Of course, a lot of investors in maize procurement are not able to compete with FRA, even on the price itself. So definitely, the more government puts in more resources in purchasing maize, the more the private sector are moved away. So I think we need to create a conducive environment to encourage more private sector participation. And one way is to reduce the spending for FRA so that we allow more farmers to buy and even export when we even have a surplus production like this particular year. Thank you very much, moderator.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mofia. At least you have been able to finish the presentation, and I'm sure our participants have gotten all the information that is needed. Distinguished participants, we are coming to the end of our program, but we just want to zero in on some of the questions that you had sent earlier, which we're going to ask our participants. And after they respond, our executive director is going to close for us officially, but that will be highlighted. So we had a question for the mines, and the same applies to tourism, but for the mining sector, it's basically asking how many players in the mining sector have had access to the 10 billion stimulus package that was availed by the government. After the Chamber of Mines gives us an answer, I think Mr. Sikumba can also answer the same question with the tourism sector, because we're talking about relief. And so we also want to assess from our end. Government has brought about these measures. At this point, do you have any information on some of your players that perhaps have benefited from these stimulus package funds? So Chamber of Mines, you can come in, and then Mr. Sikumba can also answer the same question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The Chamber is an association of the larger mining companies. So that fund is not really directed towards our membership. There is a point that I need to expand on, however, which was raised by David Chile, which was around why the industry seems to always be running to government seeking relief. The reliefs that we're seeking now are actually the same ones we've been seeking since 2018, because the changes actually resulted in a situation where the net return which comes from the mining industry is unable to sustain the cost of capital. So we are unable to afford the rate of interest internationally to finance what we need to do in this market. So if we have an operational challenge, we have something go wrong and we need to mobilize significant funds, the industry is not able to afford that. And what is being done is everything is being done from either cash for the mines like in the Northwest that are making a reasonable margin, whereas with the other mines that are yet to come into the black, they are actually relying on cash provided from head offices. This is not a safe situation to be in, especially with challenges like the one that we have just experienced. So the safer thing to do is to, get the regime to the point where we are able to afford the cost of capital. That is the goal in the reduction, in the tax relief that we are seeking. It's to actually empower us to be able to go out and get third-party capital to invest here and grow the industry. So our situation is a little bit different. The immediate reliefs that we have been seeking are really around, like we said, things that will improve the working capital position, just like the rest of the economy. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that response. We switch over to Mr. Sikumba just to find out also on the stimulus package, if at all maybe any players in the sector have been able to benefit from that. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, moderator. The 10 billion obviously has been a discussion, thorny discussion yet again. I think the uptake from the commercial banks seem to have been a challenge. Most of them do not want to increase on their loan book and the like. But slowly but surely, as at last week, I noticed a few commercial banks trying to access the association to give us opportunities on how best to access those funds. And we're already pulling in our stakeholders to see if it's something that they want to jump on. I think I'll ride on Mr. Chilembo's concern also, where one of the panelists, but rather participants, did say we keep rushing to government. I think for the very longest time as well in tourism, we've always, we're not saying give us funds. We're investors, we invest. The only thing that we want government to do is by way of making business easy in Zambia. So at any given point, most of these taxes that keep on coming on board, you talk about the tourism levy, you're talking about this and that, it makes it a bit difficult, even for planning purposes. And that's the reason why we're saying, look, can we, if you're going to tell us to say there's a particular tax, ideally, that particular tax needs to point at a particular development aspect within the sector, and will gladly actually contribute. And that's what we're talking about. So effectively, we are not crybabies. We're not ones to be going to government to say remove this so that we thrive. No, we're saying make it conducive so that everybody else gets to thrive. Fortunately, in terms of stimulus packages, the other empowerment fund that was released, the 30 million kwacha to the arts, craft and arts department. That one, I'm reliably informed the president should be should flag off the disbursement within the near future. So that in itself now looks at the other segment, the grassroots, the culture side of the business that we're talking about in tourism. We're talking about the artists, the singers, the creative arts rather. We're talking about the curio traders. Those themselves are going to access those funds to make sure that that small little part of the business remains resilient in the bigger grand scheme of things. Because if we let them die, some of them, not only the curio traders, even ourselves as operators, if nobody comes to our aid, it will be very difficult for us to get up post-COVID. So there's opportunities, and we're hoping that in the next address by the Minister of Finance, those are some of the things that will come out in black and white, and suggesting what incentives that they're going to throw towards the tourism sector.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sikumba, for that, and also for your time as well. Thank you, we really appreciate. Distinguished participants, at this point in time, due to time factor and also noticing that even our dear participants, you're almost going towards lunch, what we're going to do, we'll forward some of the questions that we did not manage to give our participants to them. And as they respond to us, we'll send back the responses to you as we send you the presentations later on. And also to mention that our presenter from Zambia National Public Health Institute has put in, he's actually left the forum. He mentioned to us that he's got another engagement. So all those questions that were health related will also be forwarded to him, and he asked for that, and he will definitely get back to each and every one of us. So at this point in time, we'll give the remaining participants a minute, and we mean just under a minute for closing remarks, after which we're going to call upon our ED to come and close. So maybe we go to Mr. Kotati Ngosa, just 1 minute, your closing remarks, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kaunda. Let me just take this opportunity to thank you for inviting us to this meeting, but also seize the opportunity to talk about the question that Rhoda asked concerning how ready our children are mentally. I think the entry point for us is the teachers would like them in their teaching to blend their teaching with the traditional as well as other modes of teaching, so that children are ready for that. And this we are doing through STEM. You hear that in the ministry we have schools that are called STEM schools, which stands for science, technology, engineering, and maths. This is the type of teaching that is being taught. We also have a project in the ministry called ZIP, Zambia Education Enhancement Project. In this project, we are trying to teach teachers, to help teachers learn how to present their lessons using different modes of learning. And if pupils are able to learn through such means in their schools, they'll be ready for what is coming. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those remarks. And also we shall be forwarding the questions that our dear participants have actually sent through. At this point in time, we go to Chamber of Mines. Mr. Chilembo, in a minute to give your closing remarks. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. I think in closing, all we would like to stress is that the way forward is in itself going to be an innovation. Other countries that have been in these circumstances have had to come up with really innovative ways to move forward in engaging with cooperating partners. Ghana and Mozambique are examples. And for us to achieve the same, we really need to come together collectively and look at the big macro picture. And for us as an industry, if we got this right, The advantage we have over the two countries that I mentioned before is that they were making investment into new industries. We have a mature industry with seasoned operators who are able to raise capital and apply it a lot faster than the timelines that those two countries were looking at. So if we can provide that bedrock as the mining sector, it will spill over into everywhere else. You can see the retail sector is currently having challenges due to the contractions in business on our side that are spilling over into demand. So the quicker we deal with this and put together a plan, the better it will be in terms of a recovery. Make a V instead of a L. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those closing remarks. And also we shall be sending through some few questions as well on the mining sector, as well as get more points on what will inform our reform proposal, especially from the mining sector itself. So lastly, we're going to go to Dr. Mofia Roda for your closing remarks in a minute. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kaunda. Just to mention that in the next few months, you will see monthly reports coming from our end on the actual monitoring of the effects of COVID-19. We are doing a study that will get participants from about 30 districts throughout the country. So I think we'll begin to see what is exactly happening around food security, and also talking a little bit on nutrition and also agriculture production. Without the data, it's very difficult to ascertain the extent of the impact. So these studies, coupled with the price monitoring, which I shared, we should be able to provide evidence-based policy recommendations. But like I mentioned already, from the small studies that have been conducted so far, we've seen that the pandemic is actually having quite significant impact on the livelihoods of many Zambians. So we need to already support the innovations that I shared at household level in terms of production, and also at policy level. We can already shift some resources from some sectors that are completely not able to operate right now, and channel them to provide in food production, because we need food production. Whatever extent the pandemic may go, food should be produced. There are already gaps that have been created through the closures of borders from the countries where initially we were importing some foods. And this is a great opportunity for our farmers to fill up that void. So once again, thank you very much to PMRC. And we hope that we'll still have more opportunities to share even our monthly surveys that will start. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mofia, for that. So distinguished participants, we've come to the end of the program. Our ED is coming to officially give the closing remarks, but just to mention that we're very grateful for your participation, for your questions. And from our end as PMRC, we have also been working on various analyses in relation to COVID. Currently, we're working on a continental analysis that tries to compare the policy responses from different countries in Africa and how they handled this COVID pandemic. And from there, we draw lessons on what we could have done better or what we can do in the future. And so we should look out for that one. It also extends to look at the issue of the CFTA, the Continental Free Trade Area, and how is it that actually, what's going to happen to the CFTA in view of the COVID as well. So from PMRC's side, those are some of the publications to look out for as well as we move forward. So having said that, at this point in time, we also want to mention that those that still want the presentations can still email us or engage us even on our Facebook page, and we shall send you the presentations. At this point in time, distinguished participants, my honor to call upon the PMRC Executive Director, Mrs. Bernadette Sulu, to come and give us the closing remarks. ED, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, moderator. In the name of Mr. Salim Kaunda, our head of research here at PMRC. And just to touch a bit on what Dr. Mofia just said about a study that they're going to be conducting on nutritional and the integration on food security. This will really give us chance as PMRC to actually look into your findings as IAPRI, especially with regard to our recent research study on nutrition and the status of malnutrition actually in Zambia, especially with regards or with specific focus on children with disabilities. And this really is one of our current focus study under the social welfare section. So that would be interesting to see, especially that you're tackling all the 30 districts. I think Mr. Kaunda and team, I think this is very imperative that we take note and then follow through. I'll begin also just recapping on a few things that were pointed out from all our discussants. And I'll begin with the agriculture sector with special bias towards women, of course. So the sector hosts majority of Zambia's population, which consists mainly of women and youth. That is according to Dr. Rhoda Mufyamukuka's presentation, and that the challenges of COVID in the sector has impacted the flow of income, in which turn has posed a negative impact on household food security due to low demand and products and food waste as a result of disruptions in the market and flow of traffic to markets. And another point was that there is need to take advantage of the opportunities that has been presented in the agricultural value chains by empowering farmers to diversify crop production and also invest in growing high income cash crops such as avocados, garlic, a shift away from the focus of maize production. Now coming to the education sector, the PS through Mr. Kotati at TESS alluded to the fact that the ministry recognizes the challenges that COVID has presented as a wake-up call for greater investment in the sector through investment in ICTs and reforming the training of teachers in order to adequately equip them for the modern teaching and learning methods. He also said there is equally need to ensure that learners can access ICTs in order to continue with lessons and avert to future disruptions. I think these are the take-home messages for PMRC, and we hope that we can compile them together, together with the other findings and main discussant points that can form a very good recommendation paper to take to the economic recovery as major stakeholders, of course, the Ministry of Finance and other players. Coming to the health sector, Dr. Kapata made a few highlights that, and the major ones are that there's need to continue reforming the contingency plan in order to adequately respond to the dynamic and evolving challenges that the COVID pandemic presents, and that they will ensure that the sector is staffed properly, and especially with specialized equipment and designated laboratory and testing facilities will assist in combating the spread of the virus, and that they are really putting in much effort to seeing that come to effect. And on continental level, the African CDC has been essential in the exchange of information and expertise in order to respond to the spread, considering the African challenges and dynamics. And I hope that this platform created by PMRC is part of this as well, to actually just create platforms where we can share knowledge and information and then also gather recommendations accordingly. Now coming to the mining sector, Mr. Sukwani also made some important highlights that the sector has been heavily impacted due to disruptions in logistics and full-scale production in order to adhere to public health guidelines at mining sites, and we agree. And there is need for government to create an enabling environment through providing tax reliefs in the sector in order to stimulate investment across board. Yes. So tourism sector, Mr. Sikumba, stressed the fact that even without COVID, revenue in the tourism sector has been declining, and particular policy options for recovery. He highlighted maybe two more, but we have just picked two, to reduce landing fees at Livingston Airport so as to increase airlines flying there and tourist numbers, as well as enable easier visa access at points of entry and online means. So we want to see that the contribution should be over that 7% GDP, of course, that he highlighted, because as I said, it's a very small percentage, and we must also take advantage of the fact that we have quite a huge resource when it comes to tourism amenities that can actually push the country forward in terms of income generation. Now, having said that, these are a few highlights, and we are going to do a communique from this one, and beyond a communique, gather recommendations, like I said, the preamble, and we will engage relevant ministries and the drivers of the economic recovery platform for the post-COVID-19 economic disruptions. So PMRC will be part and parcel of this. And then to you, discussants, who will be coming back to you on one or two occasions, or even more occasions, to just get more information or engage you so that we can move together. This is just the first one of our forum. The coming one, the second to come, subsequent one is going to take place in the last week of this month, August. So we should also look out for it. This is to the audience as well. And so we will also have the so-called gurus in the industry, who will be Zaki, will get also Ministry of Commerce, Trade and Industry to participate, and then see how we can move forward with this discussion, and hopefully that we can make an impact. So having said that, I would really like to thank you all, discussants, for taking your time and for loving our country together, Zambia, because I mean, really to take time off your schedules and then sit for over 2 hours to make these submissions and interact with the general public is also very, very motivating. To the PMRC staff, thank you very much. Until the next forum. And to you, the general public, thank you, and we continue to engage. This is just the beginning. We know the platforms where we can engage from. We are on Facebook, we are on Twitter, we are on Instagram, and more platforms. And our offices are situated at the Ministry of National Development Planning Complex, where you can drop information. So having said that, unless moderator, I have left anything else, I'd like to close this on a lighter note that Mr. Sikumba, we do have local voices in PMRC that can do voice over or deliberate on that one too. We are promoting Buy Zambia even in the tourism sector. But thank you very much all, and God bless you all.
Thank you, Edie, for the closing remarks. Thank you for that. So distinguished participants, as the Edie has officially closed, our meeting is now closed, but continue to engage with us using our various platforms. So at this point, we can begin to leave the meeting using the button on the bottom right, and see you again in the last week of August, just as the Edie has guided, for our next similar event. On behalf of us as PMRC, and indeed myself as moderator, it's been a pleasure. So goodbye for now. Thank you.